It has begun!
Welcome to the Realm Kast. I am your host, the Mortal Kombat fan Tim, and with me as always is my co-host, our lore master Yanni. Welcome, Yanni.
Thanks, fan Tim. And speaking of lore masters, we are very happy to welcome back the Fourth Snake. Welcome.
Hello.
Hey, Fourth, welcome back. It's so good to have you back on the show again. It's been a while, I think.
Yeah, the last one was the MK race episode. And that was my
the discussion,
third appearance, I think.
Yeah, that was a big one. We had a lot of guests that episode too. But I mean, even just for yourself and us, like our little one-on-one chats, it's been a long time. So it's great to have you back.
Yeah, it's also great to have whoever is going to be here on the green screen. That'll be fun to see. It could be a NetherRealm assassin sent to shut me up. It might be Quan Chi angry, might calling him a hobo in the Sonic RXD video. It could be anything.
I'm just gonna surprise you on whoever I stick there.
Well,
so
in true fashion,
what do we got today, Yanni?
For videos or just general discussions with the Fourth Snake, it is obviously lore related. What we have is a topic on what changes we would make to the Reboot era, because of course we've always been criticizing the Reboot era, and I mean, Fourth, I know you love the Reboot era, but we need to try and see what we can do with it. So we're going to try and bring it more in line with the original era. This is not just like random criticism. We want to make a comparison between the two eras with specific changes so that we blur the line between the two and bring them closer together.
I call this episode Mortal Kombat Rebirth because DC Comics did the same thing. Fourth, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, how like they basically had that new 52 and there were a lot of people that didn't like it. And so what they ended up doing was their whole Rebirth series where they took these characters and like manipulated them with a big, huge event that realigned them back with more of their classical aspects, but kept some of the good stuff that they already had in them. So it's going to be a good talk, I think.
Yeah, it's like if Fire God Liu Kang at the end of Aftermath is looking back at the Midway timeline and saying, "Oh, that's good. I'll put that into this timeline, and this one, and that." But I will say we can't call it Mortal Kombat Rebirth because there already was a Mortal Kombat Rebirth and it was atrocious. So Mortal Kombat Rebirth, perhaps.
Rebirth.
Reborn. How about the new? How many characters? How many new characters did we get between 9 and 11? We could call it the new whatever number roster it was instead of the new 52.
14, I think, new characters total.
The new 14. We'll work on this. By the time you listen to this episode, we will have figured out a title.
So, Yanni, where do you want to start on this?
Well, I think a good place to start would be with Ermac. He's sort of towards the beginning of the series where the lore started to take shape. And we can take it from there. So how about we go through, talk about his original sort of appearances and his original, lore, and then go through the reboot and then see what we would do between those two, right?
So Ermac was introduced in Trilogy, is that right?
It was in the
Ultimate 3.
Was it 3?
I think it was Ultimate 3, but I don't think it was playable until Trilogy or something to that effect.
Did he have much of a story at that time?
I think it was established that he was the creator from Outworld Warrior Souls, but that was at a time when it was kind of unclear whether Edeni was its own realm or Outworld corrupted by Shao Kahn overthrowing Sindel and Jared. So the new timeline take where it's specifically Edenian souls. Which I think it was MK9 that established that. That is technically a retcon, but it's also kind of not at the same time. It's complicated.
His character did start to take shape in ways other than that. I mean, at this point, well, I say they. Ermac was already being referred to in that form as a combination of souls by this point. So the lore was clearly there from the start in some manner, which they took further as the games went on. Now, obviously, Ermac, I'm going to have to try and keep saying they. Ermac started off being this combination of souls serving Shao Kahn, of course. But do we remember what happened throughout the 3D era with Ermac?
Yeah, he had an encounter with Kenshi at some point prior to Deadly Alliance, and I remember during it when he was in Outworld, but I think it was prior to that. And Kenshi, with his psychic powers, helped to free Ermac from whatever hold Shao Kahn had that was left over, and that was left him in kind of a daze. And then, as payment, he taught Kenshi the Teleslam, which I guess it never occurred to Kenshi that he could use telekinesis to pick someone up and then throw them down.
To pick somebody up and drop them.
Like the most basic thing you could do with telekinesis, it never occurs to me. Like, oh, that's a good idea. And then that's why when Ermac was back in Deception, they redesigned him to go from, they wanted more of like a mentor type design for him, which I kind of wish they'd gone more in that direction rather than the space ninja wizard thing or the mummy thing.
The mummy, yeah.
because it's weird how we don't have that many older characters who are mentors in the series, even though you'd think that would be a big thing with the whole next generation thing. But that was the idea for the design. And they scaled it back some to keep him still looking like Ermac. You saw that a lot, like the Night Scorpion that became Monster because it was too different, or the Rotting Corpse Noob Cybot that just became Havoc. They did that a lot with Deception, but I think the final design they came up with for Ermac in Deception was really good and helped to reflected his story some.
Yeah,
with Ermac, didn't they have one of the endings in the new era where King Jared ends up taking control of his body or something like that? Was that Mortal Kombat 9, perhaps?
Yes, that was where it was established that he's one of the souls inside Ermac, which goes some way to explain why Jared was never resurrected ever, even after Sindel came back. Mm-hmm. I said it in my recent 5 good NetherRealm retcons video that some people still criticize me for being negative on NetherRealm when there's a video that's right there, all positive, other than jabs at MK11, which are entirely warranted because it's MK11 and it deserves the hate. But yeah, that was where they kind of established that Jared is part of Ermac, and as well, which I think was part of the reason why it was established firmly is Edenian souls, which is a change that I think works better the Edenian rather than Outworld, because then Ermac as a being kind of represents the conquest of Edenia as a whole. It's like a living monument to that conquest, and having the fallen king as part of that just is icing on the cake.
So I guess let's talk about some of the issues with the new era of Mortal Kombat and how Ermac was portrayed within that.
He went from sort of being freed by Kenshi and having this like very large amount of independence being given to him and character development, where like he literally became this independent I say individual, but it's not an individual, this independent group, and actually turned sides, went from being a slave of Shao Kahn to then going on to help the forces of light, helping actually even turn them back from being zombies, I want to say, but Dragon King warriors, sort of, right? But in the reboot, just went right back to being a slave, and even more so, very much looking a lot like Reptile, in the sense that they would go from one master to another master to another master, just staying loyal to the Outworld Emperor, Shao Kahn, Mileena, Kotal.
Yes, it becomes difficult to say whether Ermac willingly made the choice to switch from Mileena to Kotal because it aligned with his personal goals, or if it was just this programmed in desire to serve serve Outworld and its interests, and then viewing Kotal as a better choice than Mileena just gave him a compulsion to do that. which is kind of one of the issues. Is he kind of how much, because he never had that encounter with Kenshi, as far as we know. As far as we know, he never had that run-in, which I guess means that I think Kenshi in this game can do the Teleslam on his own, which I guess means this version is smarter than the old one. But as far as we know, Ermac never had that cleansing of his mind like he had in the old timeline. So it makes the character feel like they have a lot less agency in this timeline compared to the old one.
Well, I think that would be a pretty easy fix then. All we got to do is have Ermac's consciousness, I guess is a good word for it, return to him in this timeline to kind of realign him back to where he needed to be.
An interesting way they could have done it is had Kosel play a part. Like Kosel captures Ermac and gets them into the Soul Chamber maybe, and is able to use that somehow to wipe Shao Kahn's influence, and then Ermac is then given free will and the choice to decide who to serve, and maybe initially he's with Mileena, but now the mind's been opened, they start thinking maybe Mileena isn't the best just because she's the child of Shao Kahn. But even then, it's like the Edenian souls are still somewhat brainwashed, I suppose, because it's in Outworld's best interest at the minute when they're Edenian. So it's not really necessarily an easy fix.
I mean, what we could do is take some direction from the Mortal Kombat 9 ending, where Jared is sort of shown to... Was it the Mortal Kombat 9 ending where they showed that Jared was the dominant soul? I can't remember. I know that they revealed that he was in there, but I don't know if he was the dominant. But I feel like we could potentially have this thing where Jared, being that dominant soul, sort of actually affects Ermac in such a way where he actually sort of has this conflict within himself, towing the line between good and evil, right? With Jared sort of prodding him towards the light side.
Yeah. It is something you have to be careful with, though, because Saurians made a comment about this on, I think it was on one of the MK Chronicles chapters that featured Ermac, where a few times I had Jared start to surface and influence Ermac a lot more directly, and someone was kind of making the point that in a way it's kind of erasing Ermac as a character and supplanting them with Jared. So it's the kind of thing you have to be mindful of, not to go too far. Having Jared's will have an influence on Ermac, fine, but not so much that Ermac is effectively like almost like a successor to Jared.
Yes, that's a good point. I mean, you could even try and go in the direction where you sort of possibly separate Jared by the end of that storyline, maybe.
Could do that.
But there has been a lot of teasing for Jared to return.
Yeah, and that there is also an interesting plot to put Kitana, Sindel, and Jade into. That's not just more helping to save the realms, which is fine for them to do that, but it's something more personal for them, which they don't really get a ton of outside of Sindel or Kitana is currently mind controlled. The other has to free her. They kind of do that over and over again.
Yeah.
Or they're both mind controlled and there's no one there to save them. It's depressing.
So I think we're all sort of in the same line as try and get Ermac to possibly switch sides, or at least gain that independence that he came into in the previous timeline.
Yeah.
Which then I suppose would be a good segue into Reptile, as we actually just mentioned him. Reptile is very similar, or was very similar, to how Ermac sort of kept changing masters. Now, Reptile, this has been one of the defining qualities of Reptile throughout both timelines, in that he has always followed a specific master. But the difference that I feel is that in the original timeline, he followed these masters with the goal of bringing back the Saurians, or Zotera as a whole, because he is supposed to be the last, or what he thinks is the last Saurian. What would you say? And would that be his defining quality, do you think? Or has that changed maybe?
It definitely was in the earlier games, I would say. I mean, even affected how his character design changed, were like its connection to Zotera was the reason he was devolving into this lizard man over time. So it was definitely more of a factor there. But you look at the current timeline, and MK90 has zero character. He doesn't even speak. He's less of a character than Baraka, which is just embarrassing. And then MKX, I like the idea of him being friends with Kotal, and even the way it was set up in the MKX comic was pretty good, aside from some slight wonkiness with the time frame. But so it's nice that he has an extra thing. He has a friend that is not just trying to get his race back, but it's a shame that he doesn't really have both. Outside of, you could argue, his ending in MKX, which was never going to be canon. Reptile's endings are never going to be canon. If you think they will be, you're deluding yourself.
Has he ever had a good ending? I can't remember. Because he's always gotten destroyed in every single one of them.
I think 2 or 3 maybe, and I think he managed to get his rocks off in Armageddon, but other than that, it tends not to go too well for him.
I feel like Reptile and, well, the Zoterans have actually had it the worst out of every single species and character in Mortal Kombat. Every single time something negative takes place. I mean, I'm just thinking back on Mortal Kombat 4, Reptile's ending. He pushes for his reward from Shinnok, and what does he do? He gets his head blown off.
Then the very next game, the one time his ending is canon, and he gets possessed by Onaga. Great.
So yeah, I guess if we wanted to align Reptile with his current iteration with what we had previously, we just need to give him the Zoteran race and then have an avalanche come and wipe them all out in front of his face or something.
I guess the Scorpion trajectory.
Tragedy is the only way.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we could still take it further. I mean, Zotera has been one of those very underused plot lines, which many Mortal Kombat fans have been pushing for many, many years now at this point, which we've never gotten. So yes, to stay true to form, we should not have Zotera return. That's a great one. But what we could potentially do to bring it more in line is maybe have the appearance of Chameleon or something, or even Natara.
It's another example of how the next generation thing was completely wasted. Like, what if Reptile with his friend Kotal, now he actually has someone backing him, this person could be like, hey, let's try and figure out how to save Zotera or find some kind of ruins or something that might be able to help bring back the race. And then they manage to find Chameleon, and then Reptile goes off to try and rebuild the species, and that leads to Reptile Jr., the new character. And that character could look like anything, could be gameplay-wise, could be a mix of Reptile and Chameleon, or Reptile, Chameleon, and Chameleon. That's an option too. Maybe even retcon the male Chameleon into being that son.
Yes.
I mean, they changed Frost's age. They could still do that here. Another idea I had, I forget if someone suggested this, but the idea of that Chameleon could be like an artificial Saurian created by Shang Tsung. Because Reptile's also always been somewhat close to Shang Tsung, mostly as a servant, but I like the idea of Shang Tsung actually almost looking out for him, like, yeah, I'll do you a solid if you keep working for me. You do decent enough work when you're not fighting, and makes an artificial Zoteran. It could be the male Chameleon or the female, or both, and so it could almost be like, which could lead to another scenario down the line where Reptile is continuing the species, but it's this bastardized version from these this incomplete genome, the same way that Melina is not a perfect clone of Katana. These aren't perfect Zoterans. And so Reptile's mating with the female Chameleon and is creating this alternate line. But then actual purebred Saurians are brought in. They're discovered somewhere in Earthrealm or Outworld. And then when they come back, there's almost like a war between the two parts of this race. And Reptiles are trying to bring an end to the conflict because we just got back from extinction. Can we not do this, please?
In my headcanon, there's only one Chameleon, and it's the first LGBTQIA character of Mortal Kombat. So
that's not a bad idea, actually. Like
it works.
A gender fluid Chameleon, but the only question is, which letter do we use for this character?
Okay.
The one that can be impregnated.
I really do like the idea of Chameleon being this the let's say, the male chameleon being retconned into being this creation of Shang Tsung, because then that's sort of like a play on the name as well. They're not just a chameleon, a lizard-like form, Saurian, but they're sort of a chameleon to their own kind as well. They're camouflaged in with that species, which they're not truly a part of.
And I think there's even been I think there actually is some debate about whether or not the male chameleon even is a Saurian. I think the female one has been confirmed somewhere, but I think the male one might not have been. I think there might have been some lines in his Armageddon ending that perhaps suggested maybe he's not a Saurian. So there's maybe something back in this idea. There's a lot you can do with these characters who are basically just moveset concepts rather than actual characters.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a real shame that we just don't get stuff done with these characters. The world's your oyster, NetherRealm. Why are you sticking with the same MK1 to 2 characters every time?
And the NetherRealm. And that world. But one thing that you did mention as well is that Kotal Khan, now that he's friends with Reptile, could potentially try and help him bring back his race or bring back Zatara. But if Kotal Khan, at this point in time, was Khan, then how come we've not seen the annexed realms being returned? For example, Edenia or Zatara?
They tried to address that in a pre-fight intro, which is like the pre-fight intros in X and especially 11 are kind of like to the NetherRealm team what Twitter is to J.K. Rowling. It's a place to kind of dump lore bits to fill in plot holes. Like with Kotal Khan is so great, why does he not try and free the realms? Like do his good friend Reptile or Solid and free his realm, or maybe free Edenia to get those guys off his back. And then it's like, well, Edenia can't be restored without tearing Outworld apart, or it just flat out can't be restored, depending on whether it's one intro or the other, which is just stupid. I mean, Edenia was merged for 10,000 years, and apparently within like the last 30 years, it changed completely, and now, if it don't learn at the end of MK3 it was freed, it can't be freed ever, because things are completely different now in this 30-year span. Like, no. Just no.
I feel like that was an extreme excuse to just not use the other realms, specifically the ones that should have been annexed, which is actually, once again, a nice way for us to move into the next topic, I think. Well, the other realms. We have Zatara, we've mentioned. We can get into Edenia in a sec, but I think let's stick with maybe even Viternus, for example, and the Chaos Realm and such, because we've mentioned Reptile. How about Nitara, right? So Nitara has come from Viternus, and then we have Havoc, we have Hotaru, we have all these other realms, and we have Edenia and possibly Zatara, as well as the other realms, being said that, hey, we can't bring these realms back because it will rip apart Outworld. But that just, to me, sounds like, these realms were extremely vital to the story itself in the previous timeline. Other characters were relevant. The Kamidogu, specifically, when they weren't just some random daggers, were very relevant too. But now it's, hey, let's mention this realm. Let's mention Havoc. Let's mention this one, and not actually do anything with them if they're not Outworld, Earthrealm, or the NetherRealm.
I really cannot fathom why. Because a whole new realm opens up so many possibilities. So just think Outworld. Like we have just normal looking people like Shao Kahn. We have the Tarkatans. We have other races like this, like the Centaurs and maybe the Shokan, depending on whether or not they're native to Outworld or a separate realm that was also conquered. There's all these different races in that realm. So think about the kinds of cool and interesting characters you could bring in other realms. Like what if the Naknadans were Chaos Realm people? Or something even more crazy and out there. And then that could even be an interesting contrast if Order Realm is just humans or humanoids. And then you have all this variety with Chaos Realm, because Order Realm, maybe they've done a genocide, I don't know. I mean, and that could make them good friends with Kotal Khan. He did a genocide, he killed the Tarkatans. So just simple, right off the bat you have this great opportunity to have all kinds of new characters you could introduce. Like, not even talk about bringing back the old ones that people allegedly don't like. Like, just so much you could do for introducing new characters, and they just refuse to touch those realms. In all the story modes, not counting endings and intros, just the story modes, I think the only time any of these other realms come up is when Shang Tsung says, "Oh yeah, I sent Garrus to Chaos Realm, and Havoc's gonna sort him out for a bit," and that's it. Why can't we go? We still haven't had a proper stage in Chaos Realm or Order Realm of even Edenia, really. No, well, we haven't Edenia with like the ruins and the pyramid, but it's like 2 or 3 total. Like Order Realm, Chaos Realm is just the conquest stage, and that's it. And again, just think about the cool stage you could have from Chaos Realm. The cool, weird creatures that could show up that can tear people apart for a stage fatality, or anything. But we just don't get anything with them ever.
Yeah, the designs too, and this is something we kind of talked about a little bit previous on the past episodes too. Was the designs for the different realms? They kind of base them off of different stuff, and they do the same thing with the characters. Like Outworld, you have like these more mystical creatures, like half dragon, half men. You have the Minotaurs. Like you have these different design concepts that are kind of rooted in a certain branch of fantasy. Then you have like Edenia, which has like these beautiful people like that are kind of more of a light fantasy rather than a dark fantasy concept, if that makes sense.
The Edenians are basically elves.
Yeah, exactly. And then with Chaos Realm and stuff like that, like it was the most we got exploration of that was Armageddon, and they just kind of threw in some people that talked backwards. But you have so much conceptual stuff you could do with that, like they did with Havoc. Like Havoc is such a unique character, and that's why fans want him back. So bringing back some of these realms, you literally have like endless possibilities and character designs that could match these realms. Like Chaos Realm, you could do the most craziest stuff out there, and then Chaos Realm, you could do the complete opposite of this craziness that you're doing.
I would say that we kind of have our solution already to this question now that I think about it. We have the MKX comic. Now, yes, was it exactly what we were looking for? No, but it was nice to see this direction taken in the comics where we have Havoc leading the charge, an actual Chaos Realmer, and it's a completely different story than just to do with Outworld for once, or specifically. So I feel like the solution was there. I just don't think it was the execution that possibly we were looking for, at least to fix this specific thing, where the Kamidogu were changed and everything. By changing the Kamidogu, you've forced it to just being specifically Outworld and the Chaos Realm with Havoc. Whereas with the previous types of the Kamidogu, you actually had to go to their realms to collect them, which was the biggest problem. So I feel like the only real true solution in this case is having a more deception style approach.
One of the funny things actually with the Kamidogu daggers is if instead of being retcons of the existing items, if they were just their own standalone blood dagger thing, this is taking place after when Deadly Alliance would have happened in the timeline. And there's really no reason why Natara couldn't have just found another way, someone else who can brave the lavas to get the orb and help her free Vaeternus. And then it could be, well, here's what would have happened in the original timeline had it gone on long enough. These blood daggers from the vampire realm, blood vampires, like these daggers from that realm become a big deal. And then that also could have been a way to bring Natara back as part of the plot. Maybe she's responsible, intentionally or otherwise. Maybe she's trying to reclaim the daggers to get them out of the wrong hands. Maybe she's being manipulated by Havoc in some misguided quest for revenge on Outworlds. Lots of options. It's just odd that he introduced these blood magic daggers, and there's all this focus on blood magic with Scarlet and Kotal. But then the vampire people don't get brought up as part of that, even though it just makes the most sense in the world to have a lot of blood magic stuff come from Vaeternus. Like one of the things I did in MK Chronicles is it had it that the blood magic that was used to create Scarlet originates in Vaeternus. Shao Kahn kind of stole that knowledge when he conquered that realm and then gave it to Shang Tsung to create Scarlet, because that was, I think, slightly fucked up by having Shang Tsung be the one to create her rather than Shao Kahn. But see, it's a way of tying things together and having interesting dynamics for certain characters. What would Natara think about this, about Scarlet? Would she view her as an abomination, a bastardization of her people's magic and their culture? Or would she just want to fuck her? That's an option too. A lot of people seem to like that one. Natara X Scarlet for life. Yeah, just plenty of options, and they just didn't go with them. And and because it's not even just like this writer or this writer, because the writing team across the Netherrealm era was totally inconsistent, constantly changing. So I have to wonder if it was like a thing from higher up, like keep it focused on just these realms that people recognize because they were in the first few games. Maybe from Ed Boon or Warner Bros. Maybe saying it's not marketable to go into the Deception stuff because people decided they hate that stuff now. So keep it just to the stuff that everybody who likes MK likes, which is just 3 realms. And they really wore out their welcome very quickly. Yeah, unfortunately.
True. I truly, I mean, this is slightly off topic, but I truly believe that the only reason that people didn't really get into the 3D era outside of the, let's just say hardcore MK fans or those who just, picked it up and actually did enjoy it was the 3D style gameplay. That I feel was the main deterrent rather than the stories themselves, because in my opinion, the story has never been better in Mortal Kombat than when it was the 3D era. And that's a testament to the lore that, I would say Tobias left us with, and then the direction that Vogel took it in after that. But, I mean, we can focus a little bit on Edenia. So we've already mentioned that Kitana specifically says that she can't bring back the realm because it would rend apart Outworld. However, obviously in the original timeline, as we've mentioned as well, it was restored. It was broken off from Outworld's control.
That's what I don't understand. Why would restoring it now tear apart Outworld? When did this rule come about, or what's different in this timeline that would make that an issue? Is she just misinformed?
Could be. I mean, it's not a God explaining. It's not like Raiden saying, "Oh, it's not going to work," because someone who would have knowledge. It's just Kitana. So, if they hadn't done the next reboot with the end of 811, they could have just carried on and had Kitana learn. Actually, no, I was wrong. Sorry. It turns out it can be done. I was just misinformed.
Yeah. she's like,
I
well,
severe and continuous lapse in my judgment.
she shows up. She goes, "Hey guys, I tried it. It actually works. We're all still here."
So that plan that you said that I said wouldn't work. I mean that's the solution. There we go. Yeah, there. That's the best. Yeah, good. Topic done.
They've almost actually turned Edenia into Kitana's white whale in the same way that Zetera and the Saurians are reptiles, because it's just kind of left to endings like, oh, here's Kitana's ending. Guess what she's up to this time? You got it right. She's saving Edenia again. It's never canon anytime she does it.
Oh, I mean, and that leads us into Kitana's other white whale, which is like the big elephant in the room with Sindel. I mean, the whole new era, it's just, oh, I got to rescue my mother. Oh, I got to rescue my mother. Oh, she's back in this game too. I must rescue her. Like, oh, and she's actually evil. Plot twist.
Surprise.
Actually, so Sindel in X, while she's brainwashed by Quan Chi, which even with the retcon, she's still brainwashed by Quan Chi, or she would have killed him because he's the guy who killed her with the retcon. I had the realization, while she says to Cat, it's either Jax or Cassie, she's like, oh, I've been reunited with my daughter. Does she speak to her daughter while they're both revenants? I don't think she does.
Good question. Yeah. Well, I mean, like Kitana and Liu Kang became leader of all the revenants, so I'm sure they must have talked at some point. Like,
yeah, it's a weird one as well, because
that could have been an interesting scene to have, just the two discussing how they've been reunited, and then all kinds of directions. Like maybe they lament the fact that it took them both dying due to such horrible circumstances to get to that point, or maybe they just reverence of Quan Chi because he managed to reunite them after being separated for so long, and that's why they're going to continue serving him, or anything. But no, they just stand there with the other revenants, and Sindel doesn't speak unless she's about to fight someone.
The whole Revenant storyline was what I was most excited for Mortal Kombat 11 because of how X ended. I was like, this is awesome. We got bad guy Liu Kang and bad guy Katana. Like, they're going to be our main villains in the next game. I cannot wait to see what they do with this storyline. And that just went up in smoke right away.
Well, ironically, smoke did not turn up after that.
Yeah, he also went up in smoke.
Yeah, he's gone too. But I mean, as for the Revenant thing, you know, Sindel, for most of the story that we saw, she was under Quan Chi's control. And like, I think it might have been you on a previous episode who kind of talked about how the Revenants, you know, there's like basically two types. There's the ones that are self-aware, and then there's ones that are just kind of like mindless drones that do what they are told to do. And that's how I always pictured Sindel in the new storyline before 11 when she comes back.
Yeah, there's definitely a distinction in MKX because there were the ones who spoke and the ones who didn't.
Yeah.
So the ones who didn't had no character. There was no exploration of them as Revenants, what they think of the situation. There's a lot they could have done with the Revenants. With 11, there's less of a distinction between them. In that case, I guess the distinction there is either they are still around or they are non-existent and no one even remembers they existed, like Stryker and Smoke. Poor guys, it never works out well for them. It's just, and then of course you got the oddities with like why a Nightwolf and Sindel just left in reserve to guard a temple that no one cares about anymore.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't even know if anyone even knew before Aftermath. Any of the characters outside of Chronica's Force knew that the Spire had been restored. Like, there's not even a bit where someone's like, Cassie, your mum died for nothing. We got the temple back. Not even that. So as far as we know, Cassie goes into the final battle thinking, "Yep, my mother died heroically. Took out some revenants, so at least I can feel good about that." And then it turned out no.
Oh wait,
she just shows up and is like, "This looks exactly like the place where my mom died." But as far as Sindel, I mean, you know, the biggest complaint people had about her, and still this debate is still ongoing. The whole "not my Sindel" thing was in the original timeline. You know, she was restored and her memories came back, and she was like a really good guy and like one of the heroes or one of, you know, Earthrealm's defenders, however you want to look at it. And then in this timeline, it was revealed that she's been faking it all along, and she actually killed Jared and hated her daughter.
Everyone killed Jared. I don't know if we can even stick by that last one.
Yeah, at this point, everybody claims, but that is a good possible solution for this. Is that, you know, Sindel's basically still kind of brainwashed, and she thinks she killed Jared, and she thinks she's a bad guy, but deep down, she's got a heart of gold.
I like it.
There are plenty of explanations fans have come up with to explain. Well, she could still be brainwashed. It could be Shang Tsung did it like he did in MK3, or maybe it's that Banshee spirit thing that is only in this game conspicuously, and that maybe he put that inside her. There's even an intro that almost makes it look like that's the case, where it like is entering her body. It's like make it look like she's
getting possessed. Almost
like it's like the Frost intro where she's like got her head down and then she comes online. Yep, the Sindel mecha has come online. The pilot's inside, ready to go. And there's plenty of ways you could make something like this work. And if you want to do this personality of Sindel, all you need to do is to make it that this personality either results in the Revenant corruption that's not worn off, or that's just the personality that she's given as part of the brainwashing, and that's also stuck around through this because she's never properly cleansed, and so she needs to go through that cleansing even after the Revenant stuff had been undone. And there's so many ways you could make this work, and I guess they thought that the twist would be shocking and memorable, and people were like, whoa, that's incredible. But a lot of people just don't care for that kind of storytelling when it's just all about the moment. Because once the moment is over and you're just left to think about the implications of this change, it just doesn't work at all. Even if we disregard the fact that clearly she wasn't faking it back in Deception when she was hugging Katana and crying. Even disregarding that and just imagine, Kronika changed the timeline after the original timeline, and in her version of events, Sindel's evil. Like, it just doesn't line up with what we knew from the previous 2 games.
Yeah.
At all.
I mean, it wasn't even that it was like a surprise in the MK11 story. Firstly, everybody knew it was coming just because of the actual writing itself. But secondly, even from the combat casts, they were already at this point in time, because they'd released the bios online prior to the DLC coming out. And I remember, was it Stephanie saying that the character of Sindel was made to look more like her actual appearance, like that she's evil and stuff. But they removed the whites of her eyes and everything, which sort of even backed that up. So I don't know. It was a very weird change.
She's very pretty in 11.
Oh yeah,
and I'm not into video game girls,
right.
but
sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a very pretty model that they built out for her.
You're more of a Baraka guy.
With his loincloth.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying.
No, I mean, that's it. I mean, she's, like, she's so evil now. She reflects, her outward appearance reflects her inward heart. And it's like, yeah, but you made her like actually really one of the prettier models of the game. And then you all, of course, have her like, her dark model, but her like it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. Like, let's backtrack that. If we're going to make MK12, this is an easy fix. Like, oh yeah, she was still brainwashed a little bit, or yeah, she had the Banshee spirit. Yeah, let's keep going.
Yes,
it's also just not a very good explanation. It's one of those things that you find shocking when you have PR people trying to, because like you'd think that with a big change like this, like with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, it's like, well, we're not going to have the X-Men or the Fantastic Four characters. Like, well, these are staples of that series. You know for a fact that people are going to want answers. So you'd think you'd have a better explanation lined up, even if it's still bullshit, because you can't say Disney didn't want them in. Even then, you should still have an explanation lined up that's better than... people don't want to play Wolverine. They just want to play a guy who, like, scratches, so Black Panther is that guy. Like, you have a better explanation lined up, and now... So they should have had a better one for Sindel than what is a very silly explanation that, well, now her inside and outside match, because it was strange that she looked like a bad guy, but she's actually a good guy, as if no other character in the series is like that, as if that's not just a thing you do. Like Batman, one of the most popular superheroes, looks more like a villain than a lot of his villains. It's just one of those things you do sometimes to make a more interesting contrast. It's a bit more, in a way, mature and sophisticated, not by much, but a bit, than to have it all be simplistic and like, this person looks like a bad guy, therefore they're a bad guy. This one is a good guy, therefore they look the part. This isn't an excuse to attack Stephanie. Don't do that. People will do that, but when you give them any kind of excuse, don't. If you do, you're a scumbag, and I hope you die.
Won't go that far, but don't do that. So we did mention, I guess we're all in agreement that the best way is to just say that Sindel was still a little bit brainwashed, right? Are we good there?
Yeah, one way or another.
All right. So why don't we go into the Deadly Alliance then? Because we've now talked about how Shang Tsung, Sindel rather, was brought back. And in the original timeline, Shang Tsung was the one to do so, as far as I remember, Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn. But in MK9, they've, of course, given the role to Quan Chi, as they have done with a lot with Shang Tsung's, general sort of feats in the series, as the Fourth Snake definitely likes to talk about, as I know. But in the original timeline, firstly, the actual creation and existence of the Deadly Alliance. The closest thing that we have in the Reboot timeline was literally one fight in Mortal Kombat 9, calling it the Deadly Alliance or something. Or was it the chapter?
Well, there was like a little outro appearance too, wasn't there? I don't remember who it was, but two characters are talking to each other and they're like, yes, we'll form a deadly alliance. And you're like, oh, they said it. They said it. But
I think that was Quan Chi and Lex Luthor in DCU.
that could have been it.
Also, Scorpion and Sub-Zero are called the Deadly Alliance, I think, in Sub-Zero's MK9 ending when they team up.
Oh,
it's just a phrase people like to throw around a lot. But the thing about the Deadly Alliance is it almost wouldn't make sense for it to exist in the current timeline, because the reason Quan Chi sought out Shang Tsung is because he was a necromancer. He could manipulate souls and control people, and so that was necessary for resurrecting the Dragon King's army. Quan Chi couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. But now, as of DCU and MK9, Quan Chi can do that. He can do all the stuff Shang Tsung can, and Shang Tsung himself can't anymore. I think there's even an intro he has with Sindel or someone where he says, "I'm not a necromancer," just flat out saying all the stuff he did in the old timeline that made Quan Chi come to him for help, he can't do anymore. So what reason does Quan Chi have to go to Shang Tsung? So it would almost have to be a completely different character he goes to if Quan Chi's involved at all. But you could say, at least with the various endings where it's like Quan Chi and Lex Luthor, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, anyone can be a Deadly Alliance if there's just two people who will work together and kill people. So while Deadly Alliance is like the plot I was most okay them not reimagining for the new timeline, because a lot of people really want them to do that, and I personally don't get it, but I'm fine with them not adapting that. But if you were to do something like that, you would have to find something else Shang Tsung could offer to Quan Chi, or swap him out for someone else.
See, the weird part about what you just said is, yes, you're right in that, I mean, Quan Chi is supposed to be the necromancer, right? So he's using all the sort of skeletal sort of spells, etc., etc. But I'm thinking back on Shang Tsung's Mortal Kombat 11 Fatality. I'm pretty sure he's got what are basically zombies coming out of the ground and ripping apart his enemy. So maybe there is some form of necromancy to Shang Tsung now.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know, dude. You can look in like 2-3 different places in the same game, and it's all completely Jared.
It's completely different.
Like,
yeah.
Apparently, Devorah, Sindel, and Shao Kahn all like ganged up on him at the same time, and each claimed credit for it.
Yeah.
What is happening?
You know, I think this is something that can be fixed if you wanted to get back, to the original power sets and to the original Deadly Alliance in order to kind of get to the Onaga plot point. And that would be, maybe they're utilizing some kind of artifacts or something, and that's how they have these capabilities. Like Shang Tsung can do a little bit of necromancy because he has an artifact. Quan Chi, he can control souls more and things like that because he has an artifact. And then somehow or another they drop it in the toilet and they don't want to pick it up because it's too dirty. And then you're moving forward. The artifacts are gone, their powers are back, and now they have to rely on each other because they don't have as much power as they did originally. Like in any way, it basically just have to do like a power downgrade for each of the characters, and you can like develop that dependency again that they had in order to form that Deadly Alliance.
Well, we sort of saw, even in the original era, where they didn't need that power up. I mean, bear in mind, we're talking about power ups, and Quan Chi was the second to last fight. Oh no, he was supposed to be. Sorry, I'm thinking of Goro. Shang Tsung specifically was the boss, right? If we go back to the original Mortal Kombat, so Shang Tsung is demonstrated to be this powerful being, and especially as we've seen in Mortal Kombat 11 towards the ending, he technically becomes the ultimate villain, right? But in the original era, we actually see Onaga, Shao Kahn, Shang Tsung, and Quan Chi form an alliance in Deception. No, was it Deception or Armageddon? Armageddon's conquest mode, I think. Yes. So we do see that they don't just do it in a way because they're relying on one of the other's powers, but it's also just to form that allegiance so that they can put their power together. They're all supposed to be these powerful fighters, right? So I feel like we have sort of had that, at least as, I wouldn't say a callback to, but a similar sort of outcome in Mortal Kombat 11, where we see Shang Tsung forming an alliance with Sindel and Shang Tsung. With Sindel and Shao Kahn, whom he obviously betrays towards the end. No Quan Chi though.
Good.
So are you saying basically just take that Deadly Alliance and form it somewhere else?
Potentially, either that or actually bring back Onaga, which we did miss out on.
I think, Onaga, it was a key plot point of the original timeline. I mean, that was, in my opinion, I mean, not counting Armageddon and its big giant, bigger threat thing, Onaga was what tied all the games together in a background type of way. Like there's all this stuff happening that we didn't know about until we got to Deception, and it all was based around Onaga.
And the One Being.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like Onaga is that big link, as you just said, because with Onaga, you have the Deadly Alliance linked to the rest of it. With Onaga, you have Shao Kahn. Shao Kahn was one of his generals, right? With Onaga, you have the story of Shujinko, which ties all the realms together with the Kamidogu, as well as the One Being. The One Being, of course, which links Onaga and Shao Kahn specifically through their urge to conquer the realms. I mean, in this case, once again, I feel like there's an easy solution, which is to sort of bring back the comic that we never got.
That was Sean Kittleton's.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously going in that direction, right? Where we were going to get Onaga coming in next, but because they do refer to it. I'm pretty sure it was in Mortal Kombat 11. They refer to the events of Onaga's resurrection or something throughout.
Yeah, Baraka has an intro with Shiva where they mention that Goro got his arms back in the almost scorched outworld, which I think there might have been a specific reference to Onaga in one of the intros, but at least that one specifically does. It's like the most direct reference to what was planned for the comic. To say it never got made, but it did still happen canonically between games.
Yeah. And like even petrified Goro in Goro's Lair is a reference to that comic book. And I mean, all that stuff's missing in this story. Unless you've watched History's interview with Sean, History Behind the Warriors interview. Like that whole story is gone except for these couple touch points that we've mentioned. And it's really important to this story as it is. I mean, even without trying to do the whole rebirth thing, it's critical because it still ties in.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I would have just preferred that we got the comic line stories over what we got in MKX. We wouldn't have had the sort of missing information between those games. We don't have to have it, as you were saying, Forth. Like it seems to be this chamber where they just throw in random tweets. Right now, I like the fact that they'll have dialogue which can point towards something that we've all been wondering about, which maybe hasn't been mentioned in some way. I do like that, but at least if we're going to do that, either make it fun or make it canon. Don't give us and make it something that you didn't have a chance to mention throughout the story, rather than let's use this to fill the plot points that we couldn't do otherwise.
With introducing, Onaga in the method that was planned out, would that fix this continuity and realign it? Because I mean, the after effects of Onaga in that continuity, or in the current Mortal Kombat 11 continuity, the after effects, there aren't really any, except for that Goro becomes petrified. Like we don't see any big changes to any of the characters, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's kind of always the issue the comic had, because it was mostly being made after MKX, like after any consequences had already been felt. So other than taking something from MKX and saying, "Oh, that happened. That's because of this from the comic," there wasn't really anything that could really be done. Whereas it would have been better if the comic had been made right after MK9 or after MKX and released after MKX. Because there wasn't much room for Sean to do much, and that's why you end up with weird inconsistencies. Like Ermac is apparently still with Melina by this point when Kotal's already the Khan, when MKX clearly showed that's not how it works. And that Sonya goes through the same arc she did in MKX. Whereas if the whole project's been planned out differently, there could have been more room to actually develop some things in the comic that could then be addressed in the game. It's like, yeah, this happened. Go into the menus. There's like a thing that explains what happened in the comic if you didn't read it. There's some intros to reference it. And there you go.
Yeah.
I think a better solution would be to, basically explain away the things like Ermac and the stuff that we've already explained. And then now at this point, have Onaga show up or be introduced as a villain after 11 or something that happens after 11. And I think that would give the story a little bit more weight and still kind of tie things back together. Because at this point, I mean, the Onaga story, it's a missed opportunity. It's like something that's not going to change anything from where we're at. So if you were to do it now, then you should do it after 11, and basically it'll have a new weight to it, and you can still do things like a Deadly Alliance to bring Onaga back.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you. Although I feel that if we are going to have any solution through the use of Onaga, we're going to have Shujinko in some manner too, or at least somebody in that Shujinko role, because the Kamidogu...
We already got Shujinko.
Yes, and that's a big issue, actually, in my opinion. Shujinko comes up as this... Well, he's at the Kang Temple, right, in the comics, protecting the Kamidogu dagger at the request of Raiden. And he's somehow possessed by Havoc. I don't know if he's actually possessed by Havoc at first. I think they do show that he's cut on the arm or something, right, by the blood magic dagger. I can't remember exactly. But this leads to Scorpion being killed by Havoc, or Hanzo being killed by Havoc. And I don't remember actually if Shujinko dies at the end of this, or if he's just one of Havoc's guys now at this point. He's
just with Havoc for the rest of the scene, and then he's never mentioned again.
But I'll say this. Okay, I know this is going to be very controversial within the Mortal Kombat community, but Shujinko is mentioned in the endings. And of course, they're not canon, but especially the way that Mortal Kombat X's endings worked, they could have been like a continuation of the story, and they all kind of tied together a little bit. So they're not canon, but technically, those actions and events are kind of happening, or some form of them. And so in I think it was Mortal Kombat X's endings.
Cassie.
Was it Cassie or was it
yes, Cassie.
So she goes on a mission to find somebody who's been stealing souls. And, as you're listening to the story, you're presuming, oh no, Shang Tsung's back and he's been stealing souls. And then she comes across Shujinko. So that means that, her ending is she's going on a mission to seek down something that's already been occurring. So it's possible that Shujinko is in, this new timeline, and somewhere along the line he's become corrupted. And it could be because there was no, quest for the Kamidogu. Like, he didn't have to pursue that because of the way that this timeline is. And so he ended up becoming corrupted and becoming a soul stealer.
I like it
himself.
I really do. But where does that soul stealing power come from then, if not from Damashi?
It could come from the Kamidogu, that or Havoc's possession or something like that, and it'd be easy to, or I say it'd be easy, but you can undo that and bring back Shujinko and have his quest still be existent and do things like reveal the red dragon and like everything that he managed to do within Deception could still be existent within this timeline. It just could be that he became corrupted along the way.
This is going to have to tie into Taven and Dagon. Sorry, fourth.
Another way you could approach it is to have it that Raiden had visions of Shujinko's quest and what that would result in. So you tracked him down and said, listen, Shujinko, I understand what you think is going on. Here's what's really happening. So Shujinko's like, oh, well, I guess I better call off this quest and help Raiden to hide the Kamidogu again. And so then Damashi is still out there, so he needs to find someone else. And that could be your Deadly Alliance. He finds a new champion and has them help him to try and collect the Kamidogu. And then, I mean, that could have been a really cool plot for a season of the comics. If where Shujinko is brought in as like an expert on the Kamidogu who knows where they are. Maybe Havoc's blood magic is like still whispering in his ear, trying to corrupt him, make him turn against the Earthrealmers. But he's brought in to help track down the Kamidogu again to stop this villain from acquiring them all. Because there's going to be a thing where they don't know where Ideni is because Ideni was never freed, and Shujinko never found it. So it's like, well, the villain could easily find that one when they have to find the rest before the villain can get any of them. There are options.
Yeah, like this stuff could still happen and could still be existing out there, and it's just something we don't know about because they didn't dive into it in the new games. And I think that kind of lines up with where we're at if you do it correctly. Which
then really would also, as we said, lead into Taven and Dagon, right? Because you're not going to go from Onaga and skip Blaze, are you? The whole point of Onaga returning is that there's that risk, that threat of the one being, and then all the combatants being at the height of their powers, right? So assuming that we do have this take on Shujinko becoming the hero by taking all the powers off of everybody, this could be done completely differently. There was a very good point actually about Shujinko's appearance in Cassie's story, and that was a really cool ending actually, now that you reminded me of it. But if we do have somebody else going along those lines, or even just, Onaga's return as a whole, moving into the story of Armageddon, it's just, how would we bring Blaze in without leading to the exact same end point that we had in Armageddon? Because we've already been at Armageddon once. To fix it, they had to literally go back in time. Right? So where do you go from there? How do you bring Blaze back in?
I mean, I at this point, you could still have Armageddon, but you could have a different outcome. I mean, this timeline's completely changed, so Armageddon still is probably going to have to happen. I mean, you take the ending of Mortal Kombat 11, and you have your two different endings, but let's say Liu Kang's like, I'm going to let the timeline keep going. And if he does that, then Armageddon's still going to happen, and you're still going to find out who's the victor. And maybe Shao Kahn doesn't win this time because Liu Kang's not a zombie. Liu Kang's fire god Liu Kang. And, he could still be the main hero. This plot point, I think, could still continue on similarly to how it did in the original timeline.
And to be clear, because I know someone will probably bring this up in the comments, yes, Liu Kang does have the option to let the timeline carry on, because in Aftermath, Kronika never gets a chance to reset the timeline. They're still in the default chamber before the reset happens. So him resetting the timeline is just something he chooses to do. He if he wanted to, he could just let it play out, which I think would probably be the better option for MK12. Just ignore those actual endings and have him decide, you know what, let's just let things carry on as they are, but maybe I like what DC's been doing with this Rebirth thing. I'm going to bring some things back from the old timelines.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would love if they did have like an actual Rebirth for 12. I mean, we've said on previous episodes, I really want to see like Great Kung Lao story for Mortal Kombat 12, but if they did like a Rebirth style and kind of fix timelines, merge timelines in the way that I thought they were going to do with 11 when I originally saw some of the trailers, I think that would be a cool thing to do.
Well, why not both? I mean, we've all been talking about how we'd like to see the Great Kung Lao, and that would be awesome. But just because Liu Kang has gone back in this ending to the Great Kung Lao does not mean we're actually going to get a game in that timeline where the Great Kung Lao is the hero. It could just be that he's gone back in time and we end up right back at the first tournament. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, right? But but it doesn't mean that we have to get that story with the Great Kung Lao. The Great Kung Lao could just have that effect on the story at a later point in time, right?
Mhm.
But what about a solution to Armageddon of it not being Liu Kang, of it not being Shao Kahn, not even Raiden, but the original intended winner, Taven? If I remember correctly, Taven was the one who was supposed to win that, according to original plans.
Do you mean it from a writing perspective or like in-universe Argus's plan?
No, from both technically, from a writing perspective.
That was clearly the intention, because Taven has two endings: one for Conquest where he narrates it, and then one for arcade mode where it's the exact same ending but Argus narrates instead.
Yes.
So clearly that was the intention of where it was going to go, and even set up how things could get worse, because while it was believed throughout the game that one brother's victory would lead to all the warriors dying and the other would lead to them all being depowered, Taven finds that when he wins, instead everybody just gets more powerful.
Yes.
And so the next game would have presumably then been, things have gotten worse. The realms are even more imminently collapsing. Something has to be done, which I guess would have been, I guess I have this sword. I could probably kill a bunch of people with my new powers. And then he probably would have been Taven wiping out half the characters himself, just in one scene, like Sindel would in the end.
And, going back to Mortal Kombat 11's ending too, the Liu Kang rebuilding the timeline and, kind of manipulating things with the Great Kung Lao could have led to a way for Taven to end up winning the tournament, or Armageddon could still happen in this reimagined timeline. And we could have Taven showing up. And then let's say he does depower everybody, and then we're back to like a Mortal Kombat 1 style roster where, or better yet, we're at a Mortal Kombat style roster where you have to have an Arcana to have powers. It's a birthmark. He was born with it.
Could you imagine if that's actually what's going on in MK 2021? This is the timeline Fire God Liu Kang creates. The reason he's not the hero now is because he's taken a step back. He's almost like a Raiden-like figure, and so he has to bring in make a whole new person to take his place. And the Arcana is him trying to limit people's abilities.
Oh my gosh, we've cracked the case, bro. We're on to you.
That's why the Shao Kahn statue is the MK11 one, because that's the most recent image in Liu Kang's mind. That's what you recognize him as. I see what you're doing there. I get it. I see what you're doing.
Oh, all right, Yanni, what's next?
I can't tell if I like this or I don't. Okay, well, let's go back to the events of Armageddon, where we actually see the Tekunin Sector's clan. So
the Cyber Ninjas?
The Cyber Ninja, exactly. Now, this was a really cool idea for a clan, which Sector created after failing to take charge of the Lin Kuei from Sub-Zero. Surprise, surprise. So he creates the Tekunin, and they get in the way of Taven, only to never be heard from again. Until Mortal Kombat X. In Mortal Kombat X, we see the Tekunin this time being formed by Triborg. So Triborg was created with data from the Lin Kuei, which the SF had kept on hand, I think it was. They were doing experiments with that. Now, the difference
between... That's what it says, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was it. But I think the difference here of the Tekunin in both timelines is that the Tekunin in Mortal Kombat X may or may not be canon.
So, yeah, that's what I was about to ask, because with Triborg maybe not being canon, in my head canon, the Tekunin were formed by Frost in Mortal Kombat 11 instead. But I mean, either way, they still get generated or created.
Yeah, it's under different circumstances, because with the original Tekunin, it was after Sector was ousted by Sub-Zero, he went off and just made his own clan from scratch, probably abducting a bunch of people for it to force him into the cyberization. Maybe some of them were were up for it like he was, which could be an interesting dynamic for expanding a Tekkunin roster. But with the second timeline, he kind of does succeed in doing that with the Lin Kuei, hence why it's Cyber Lin Kuei. But functionally, it's a Tekkunin, but it's now actually all the members of the Lin Kuei that he has done this to. And then Frost does the same with Sub-Zero's second one in MK11. So it's technically not the Tekkunin. I know some pedantic people will say that. I probably would as well, but technically speaking, it really is the same idea. But I do think personally it's a bit more interesting if he just goes off and does it on his own instead of I'm just going to make it from the old Lin Kuei. It's like fully separate it from what the Lin Kuei is. So you've almost got like a divide between what the Lin Kuei, two ideas of what the Lin Kuei should have been. Sub-Zero is like it should be a force for good. Sector's like it should be a force that does its own thing and is also automated. And then they could clash, but they don't even interact at all in Armageddon because Sub-Zero's plot is about his brother and Smoke again. And I know I sound frustrated saying it again, but it was nice when that was a thing he cared about.
Yeah, definitely missed that.
So I guess if you wanted to reintroduce the Tekkunin, then you could have Sector hijacking the Cyber Lin Kuei and creating Tekkunin or converting them, like just switching their program out or something, and they all come online as Tekkunin rather than
Sector has
Cyber
been
Lin
destroyed
Kuei.
at this point.
Oh, but he's a computer, and it's Mortal Kombat. Nobody's truly dead.
If you remember, in I think it was Kano and Jax's endings for MK9, Kano became like an AI, like ascended into AIhood. And the same could be done with Sexor. I think I actually mentioned this in a video at one point. Like Sexor's personality could be in that data and take over Triborg, and then Triborg could go on this whole existential thing. Who am I? Am I Sexor? Am I Triborg? What am I? Or he could just say, "Yeah, I'm Sexor reborn.
I am Triborg now.
Let's go and turn more people into robots."
Also, Mortal Kombat 11. I mean, Sector is technically there. He's a background character, and don't you fight him during the story mode?
Yes.
Yeah.
At some point. So
that's a good point. Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's destroyed, but is he really destroyed? I mean, just do some computer hacking.
I think he's back because of the time merger. I think it is the past version because Cyrax exploded and he's back as well. So I think it is the past versions of those two are brought forward.
Yes, I mean, Sector explodes anyway, doesn't he? In the Black Dragon.
Kano blows him up.
Yep.
Oh, so I didn't even think about it being the past versions. I always just thought that they were rebuilt or something like that.
Well, if you, I guess you didn't remember that in the comic. Cyrax gets his free will restored by Sub-Zero and then sacrifices himself to give the Lin Kuei a fresh slate. So if it was that same version, then even if he did survive the explosion, it would be weird for him to be captured and reprogrammed again. So I think it's just supposed to be plucked from the time that he was brainwashed during MK2 or 3.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's vague enough though to where we could say it's not.
Sure.
just for rebuilding, like, we're fixing the past mistakes here, so we could just say, yeah, this is the timeline that you guys are following right now, and we brainwashed them again, but then Sector takes over all the programming and uploads himself to every single Cyber Lin Kuei and becomes the Tekkunin. That's my fix.
I can see that
if we want to bring them back. Yeah.
I mean, or it could be that it could even be that there is an AI of Sector, possibly he's Triborg or he's takes over Triborg and then seeks out Frost after she's banished from the Lin Kuei and has her help him to get into the Lin Kuei and capture them and then bring them all over.
Yeah, that'd be great.
He just read my mind, actually, Fourth. Sorry, he just read my... I was just about to say something extremely similar. I was going to go with exactly what you said, but say instead of Frost in the new timeline becoming a cyborg, he has the promise of giving her the Dragon Medallion in return for him taking charge of the Lin Kuei. Because we don't see the Dragon Medallion at all, as far as I know, in the Reboot era. Do we?
Yeah, but we saw a redesigned version that is not as good in Sector's ending, where it's like gold. And then I think the idea is that the medallion that you see on Sub-Zero in MKX is supposed to be the Dragon Medallion, hence why it's part of one of his variations, where it gives him power like it did in the old timeline. I think that's what it's supposed to be, just completely redesigned, but then it has no plot significance. There's no suggestion that it augments his powers.
That's what I meant.
We never got a cool ice arm again. And the ice arms were the coolest thing they ever did with him, pardon the pun, in the original timeline aesthetically. And then now it's like nothing. He's just MK3 Sub-Zero with a beard. No grey hair, no cool ice arms. But you can have a variation where it looks like someone's shining a blue light from inside his skin. Wow. Looks so good, guys. Thank you.
You know, introducing the medallion in that way would be really cool too, because, you know, let's say Frost takes it, she's now Cyber Frost, and even more so than the original timeline, she can't harness that power because she's got all this cybernetic stuff to her. She becomes frozen in ice, and she is right back to where she was in the original timeline. Like, we just course corrected it all with that one little play.
Which is also why Sector would offer it to her, because he can't use it. He has no powers. It won't affect him at all. He's got, or it could even be, it would affect him, but he's like, I don't care for this. I can augment myself purely with cybernetics. I don't need this mystical mumbo jumbo. You can have it. I don't care.
Yeah, we've got two fixes for the price of one. I like it.
Right.
So how about the actual time skip of MKX itself? How many years was the time skip?
20 or 25. It's completely inconsistent within MKX.
Yes, exactly.
Long enough to make babies and then
and train them to
annoying.
Kill, apparently.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, they could have started young.
Oh god, it's just funny because you look at Johnny Cage in MK9. Whoa, I'm not going to kill anyone. And then, like 20 years later, here's a gun, Cassie. Shoot.
What do you mean 20 years later? 1 year later. So if we don't have the MKX time skip, we have the same roster, just with, let's just say, 3D eras, a more varied roster, basically. Characters which, in my opinion, would come from different realms all over the place if we were to go through the exact same sort of process that we did without this time skip. We have no true aging, whereas in MKX we see Johnny, Sonya, etc. All the OG cast are now older, wiser, etc. Or at least, I mean, we mentioned at the start of this episode how we have the mentors and stuff. Ironically, I don't think we had a single good mentor. Kenshi didn't do very well. Scorpion didn't do very well, or Hanzo didn't do very well. Sonya definitely
did the best, I think.
Hanzo did the best.
Yeah, I think he's the only one. He's the only one we actually see mentoring, I think.
I feel like the one who did best was Sub-Zero, even if it didn't work purely because of who his student was. If that makes sense.
Maybe.
Who is Sub-Zero's student?
Frost.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's easy to forget she was in MKX very briefly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Second, overreacting to him sitting having tea with Hanzo.
Despite having no connection to that earlier conflict herself.
Exactly.
And why does she care about the Jedi dude?
But with the reboot, we had the time skip, 20-25 years. We have complete different roster as a result of this. We don't see most of the 3D era. I mean, for example, we never hear of Darius. We never hear of Dairu. I think we have had Hotaru mentioned once at this point. The only one who truly gets much of a reference is Havoc. I don't even think Natara is properly mentioned other than through gear.
So don't forget Li Mei. She shows up.
Li Mei, yes. Yeah. As a refugee who cannot fight.
And Aaron says that he slept with Natara as well as Scarlet.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Such a random thing to include.
Hey, I mean, it's quite the flex. He slept with a vampire.
It's better than completely ruining her like 2021 did. I'll give him that, I guess.
But we end up with characters who, in my opinion, are nowhere near the level of even many of the lowest. And when I say lowest, I mean like Cobra level characters of 3D era. Like, okay, we have Takeda, who in my opinion was clearly the best addition to the new roster. We have Cassie, who, while I don't think is necessary, was a cool sort of blend of Johnny and Sonya. We have Kung Jin, who was an interesting character with bad execution, in my opinion. We have Jackie, who, yeah, we already know my answer here. We have Ferrator, we have Collector, Cetrion, and Garrus, right? So we already have this different sort of type of additions to the roster where most of them are either from Outworld or Earthrealm. One is a goddess who literally makes no sense to be added to the roster, in my opinion, Cetrion. We have Garrus, who could have been very interesting if he was not very similar, in my opinion, at least, to Tremor. And then Ferrator, who was technically of a different race, but once again, Outworld. So here, the problem that I think we face is that most of the characters are very one-dimensional, at least in where they're coming from. And how little, I say the word diversity, how little diversity we're getting across the roster purely because of Mortal Kombat's potential. As we mentioned again at the start of the episode, we have so many different realms. You open up one realm, you have the opportunity to bring in 1 million different characters of different types of species, whatever, right? So how would you fix this time skip? What would you do? Like half it? What would you do?
I don't think you can fix a time skip. I mean, unless you rewound time, which is possible with Chronica's powers and stuff like that. But honestly, I don't mind that there's a time skip and they're introducing new, younger characters. Because, I mean, John Tobias did an interview himself and said that would have been his plan for Mortal Kombat, I think 4, if he had gone on, was that he was going to do a time skip and introduce Liu Kang's son as the main protagonist. And I enjoy that they tried something that way. I just feel like they didn't stick with it. Like, I would have loved to have seen Takeda continue on. And I think, you know, even if you wanted to realign it with the original timeline, you could still have the combat kids, like, for all their good and all their bad. Like, that's something that could still happen. And you could still have these characters show up that are new characters. So personally, I don't think you need to touch a time skip. But what do you think, Fourth?
I think the time skip as a concept was fine. Like, again, that was a plan John Tobias had, and it's what I swear, I don't know where you can find this information anymore, but I swear like Ed Boon or John Vogel around the time of Armageddon said that was what the next game was going to be after Armageddon. Wipe the slate clean, then introduce all these new next gen characters. Mm-hmm. I think the concept for it is fine. It's an excuse to introduce new characters, and I mean, I know they've been kind of hit or miss with the NetherRealm era, but at least it is a bunch of new characters, and it's not just the same characters from the same 2 games over and over again, which is a serious issue with the NetherRealm era. But I think it's more of just an issue of the execution of the characters. I think you really need to. It's difficult to do this whole next generation kids thing because it's very, very easy to make it incredibly lame. It's the kid of one of the characters, but maybe gender swapped, maybe just the exact same character. Maybe they're on the other side this time.
Which happens a lot. Yeah.
Like, wow, holy shit. But I think the combat kids just need a bit more fleshing out, especially Jackie. Aaron Black is fine if they can just make him more consistent in his backstory. Kotal, interesting ideas. Devora, incredibly frustrating with what they've done with her, but it's a whole new race they've introduced. Yeah. And that could have been from another realm.
Yeah, same thing with Collector.
Yeah, those two could be from Chaos Realm, or maybe even Edenia. Maybe there are parts of Edenia that are darker than we knew. There are these like evil bugs that are trying to kill everyone. And
you mentioned Collector actually being from the Chaos Realm. I feel like the Collector's species, the Naknadans, would be very interesting Order Realm species, actually. because they fall into one line of work specifically and they follow that through, right? They seem to commit to one sort of form of order, which would be very interesting to see, rather than just being purely outworld all the time, which everybody has demonstrated we are quite sick of, right? But yeah, no, I think you're right. It's the execution. If they're able to sort of fix the characters themselves and how they're handled. I mean, before the game came out, I did not hate, for example, Jackie. You know, I was looking forward to seeing what they did with these new characters. But as I got through the story, oh my God, I hated her character. You know, it was the bad execution. For all we know, they could actually reboot everything and bring them back in and just be like, hey, you know what? These are actually really cool characters now. Takeda was a prime example of a beautifully done new character, which fit the aesthetic, which fit the true feel, I think, the atmosphere of Mortal Kombat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
he also had the advantage of actually feeling like his own character, because even though he's clearly partially a blend of Scorpion and Kenshi, you can see where those two characters influence him. Like, he's practically just swinging Scorpion's spear around and two of them, and he's also got a bit of telekinesis. But it's
still unique enough.
Not what dominates him. Yeah, it's whereas with Cassie, it's like I feel like the stuff that she gets from her dad is a bit too much, and then what she gets from her mum is almost not enough. Like, but I guess like the way they approached it was better because she just got guns, which is similar to what Sonya does, but not to the extent of ripping off moves from Sonya. Then you have Jin, who's just completely unique, and Jackie, who is almost one-to-one Jax. Anything she does, Jax could have easily done instead.
Yes, exactly.
So I think just retooling, especially Jackie. Like, I mean, I like the addition of the extra kick moves, but if that was her focus, she would have gone over better. Or, as a friend of mine suggested, she should have been the one with all the drones and the turrets and stuff.
Exactly.
To give those to the other characters. That should be her thing. She's into robotics because of her dad. Mm-hmm. And so that's a fun little connection to her father. You can see how that influences her, but she's not just Jax as a girl.
Yeah. I think Cassie is the perfect example of what most franchises do when they try to introduce like the new next generation, like Mortal Kombat Next Generation. And, you know, they introduce characters like Shi Kang. It's actually Liu Kang's daughter, and she has the power of shooting fire and bicycle kicks. It's like, it's the exact same character.
The difference is it's not a bicycle kick, it's a tricycle kick.
yeah, exactly. She punches them while she's doing a bicycle kick. The tricycle kick. Brand new moves.
Or she does that Lee May move from Deadly Lights, where she like launches forward and punches in the air.
But yeah, like Cassie's that fits into that mold which we usually see, and like what I respect about the Combat Kids, like I'm not a big Combat Kid fan except for Takeda, but they attempted to do that, and they attempted to not do it in that traditional way. Like Cassie is kind of that stereotype. Jackie is a little bit too, but they still try to add in their own characteristics from Cassie. Like Cassie still had some Sonya type stuff in her. Takeda, as you guys mentioned, he was the perfect mixture of his two parents, or you know, the people that trained him. Yeah. But he was still very unique in his game style and the way that you played him. And Kung Jin, I mean, he wasn't my favorite character to play, but he was extremely unique, and they incorporated that Shaolin story to him to tie him into everything. And that's what I respect about Mortal Kombat X's introduction of the Combat Kids, is they did try to do a next generation and do it in a way that made them original. And then they just, like halfway through development, they gave up on it and threw in all the old people too at the same time. And it was like, why do I want to play Cassie if I can play Johnny? You know, or you know, why would I do that? Like, I got the original cast here also. So yeah, I think we could still use them. You're
right about Kung Jin. Like I did say, he was bad execution. I feel like the only thing that actually truly put me off him, because other than his personality, that's what put me off him. Yeah, it was It was too arrogant, and it was too much after a while, you know. Whereas his gameplay was amazing, and I mean, his actual story was really good too. The problem was just the character personality. That was it, and that's really what to this day puts me off of Jackie. aside from the fact that she's also not unique in any way up until MK11, and in which case I still maintain that she's just them trying to push her and giving her something which everybody likes, which is MMA. You know, that's or Muay Thai. It was a combination. I mean, it's MMA in the end. But that was the only thing really that they did wrong, in my opinion, with the Combat Kids. And you just said it very well. Like they had this great idea, and then halfway through they sort of just gave up and just like, hey, let's just do this, you know. But
before we end, I want to talk a little bit about my favorite rebirth idea here. And this is something that we got from like one of the staff members from Uppercut Editions, is Kotal Khan. Okay, so Kotal Khan, he's introduced in the Mortal Kombat X series. We get to see this character. But where was he during the original timeline? I mean, the stuff still happened the same way, but what happened to Kotal? We never see him. Like, he must have influenced the Aztec culture, as has been referenced in Mortal Kombat games. The theory, and we've talked about this before, but I love it, and I just want to keep bringing it up, is that in the original timeline, Kotal Khan was actually meat. So he was one of Shao Kahn's generals, fell in love with Jade or whatever. You know, in the new timeline, he's saved Reptile's life and all that stuff. But what if in the original timeline, he never got to be Kotal Khan because he made Shao Kahn mad and ended up in the flesh pits and never got freed and was experimented on and became meat? Like, this is the ultimate rebirth story, in my opinion. And
it fits too, because his gameplay style is very wrestling focused as meat, and then he's very grapple focused as Kotal.
Yeah.
Blood magic.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Cuts himself and So if we wanted to reintroduce meat, like, I don't know, throw Kotal in a flesh pit and then meat's back. Like, this is doable, people.
Give Kotal a meat skin.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. For any modders out there that are listening to this, I want to see a meat skin on Kotal.
I do think this is probably the best theory to come out of Mortal Kombat in many years, actually.
Yeah.
there isn't a lot of like theory crafting with MK, I feel, like, compared to a lot of other fandoms. You don't really see it that much.
Yeah. I think that, I think
the last...
do you think the last?
I think the last one I could think of. I think the last one was like when people theorized that Frost was the once mentioned younger sister of the Sub-Zeros, and that's like the last big MK theory.
Right before the reboots and stuff.
I mean, there was that, but I think I would add the speculation of the woman in Jade's MK9 ending as well. But then again, that's more speculation rather than actual fan theorizing. So yeah, that's a good point, actually. I mean, I think one of the cool things about this topic today is that it relates very heavily to your Chronicles series, which is one of the, if not the only, one of the few places where you can really find anybody sort of giving a different take on the Mortal Kombat series or storyline itself. We have mentioned it in the past on previous episodes, and I believe that today's topic was a great way for you to sort of bring in some ideas from it. So, I mean, normally we actually ask our guests, do you have any ongoing projects you'd like to share with our viewers? I mean, we know you have this project. Everybody, if you're interested in taking, this theorizing further, go check it out. It's a really cool read. I'm not up to date, but from what I've read, it's very interesting. It's a lot more of this discussion, but in actual writing form. So check that out, everybody.
He's got...
Sorry?
So it's just explain it. It's like it's Mortal Kombat Chronicles with a K, of course. It has to be a K. It's kind of... It's almost like an inversion of this, whereas here it's like bringing aspects of the old stuff into the new timeline. This is more like some stuff from the new timeline is in the old timeline. So after Armageddon, it then would move into MKX, like a tweaked version of MKX, because a lot of the setup for MKX was already there in Armageddon. Johnny and Shinnok are the two faction leaders, which I imagine a lot of people don't know because it was only in the bios that released after the game, but Johnny's the one who got the good guys together. Shinnok got the bad guys together, so their rivalry is already established, and then, well, why are all these revenants here? Because a lot of people died in Armageddon. And then it would go into like maybe an original plot, which you do have an idea for an original plot to occur between X and 11. And then 11 is just heavily changed. Like, there are no Titans. This is established. Liu Kang tells Johnny to his face, there are no Titans. They don't exist. It's bullshit.
I love it. That's the solution for the Titans. Great.
That's the solution for the whole series right there.
Yeah. Don't go into it assuming it's like the whole story being told like bit by as is, because like it's really just short stories set within this like amalgamated universe, but as well as like an alternate universe where the time travel stuff does happen, because sometimes I have cool ideas like for there, like what if the Cyberlink Quay are all from the past? What if Frost found Sub-Zero from that time and she had control over him, and she finds no satisfaction in that?
Yeah,
and just really whatever story I think to write, and I think if you're only going to read one, I would definitely recommend the Superstars life story, which is basically kind of what this universe is from Johnny Cage's perspective, going from the beginning all the way through to at the end of MKX, and just so you can see how like Cassie Cage is born after MK4, and then she's already alive by the time of Deadly Alliance and Deception, Armageddon, and there's like a focus on Johnny's career and how dying and coming back affects his career or his relationship with Sonya. Although the funny thing about the Sonya thing is, I actually forgot to include how Johnny met Sonya in this story that's about Johnny and in big part Sonya and Cassie. Johnny's like, I'm going to go fight in this tournament. Next scene, he's back. Oh, I met this woman called Sonya. She's pretty cool. It's like, but I've not depicted that yet.
I can tell you how you can fix that. All you need to do is put that in a pre-fight interaction.
I'll tweet it. It's fine. People will.
I was gonna say that way it's not canonical either, so you can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I think the ultimate sort of retcon, or rather the ultimate sort of fix that we have for all of these topics that we've been discussing today, has already actually been taken care of by NRS themselves. We have Fire God Liu Kang's ending and Shang Tsung's ending at the end of MK11, where they literally either reboot everything or actually go to the other realms. So, a kind of pointless discussion, everybody. Sorry.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they have kind of given us a good setup for Shaolin Monks 2, where we play as Raiden and Fujin conquer the realms for Shang Tsung.
I didn't even think about that being a possible game. Like, everybody keeps asking me, which timeline do I want to continue? I'm like, well, that's obvious. But now you've completely changed my mind, for sake.
I think we just want anything Shaolin Monks, don't we, at this point?
Yeah. I mean, you can look at Ed Boon's polls on Twitter, and I think it's pretty obvious everybody wants Shaolin Monks.
Shaolin Monk style, exactly. I mean, it's a fighting game, sure, Mortal Kombat, but oh god, everybody loved Conquest and Deception. We liked, I think Conquest and Deception was better than Armageddon's Conquest, but Armageddon still was innovative in some ways. I can't speak anymore. And Shaolin Monks was honestly the best of them in the sense of a sort of RPG style gameplay kind of thing, where you're running around leveling up and everything. So hopefully I would love to see Fujin and Raiden get one, actually. That would be a great thing. Or even Katana Jade or something along those lines.
Maybe 4-player with all the female ninjas.
That'd be cool.
It'd be really easy to structure as well. Because the way Shaolin Monks is, like, each level is based on an existing MK stage. But you just say, instead of being like, this one's a living forest, this one is the tower, or whatever we're calling it in this game. It's like, this one is Earth Realm, Outworld, Nether Realm, Chaos Realm, Order Realm, and you just have all the realms, even new ones we've never seen before. Because that's another thing we kind of not even really mentioned, but you can introduce new realms.
Yeah, very true.
That is an option.
Yeah.
You don't have to just say, well, there's the 6 from Deception plus Vaeternus and Zotera. Like, there are others you can introduce.
Yeah.
I think even the Kaitin are actually from a different realm that got conquered by Shao Kahn.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
It's kind of unclear because it's called the Armageddon Islands or Isle, but which suggests it's just part of Outworld, but Khan conquers it, so I guess it was another realm. But you can do plenty of levels as long as you don't make the chitin level have like jump scare spiders. I'll never forgive whoever at NetherRealm came up with that in MKX. They need a slap.
Honestly, I feel you. I was terrified to play the crypt alone. I actually was in MKX. But yes, you are correct about the chitin, by the way. Arniek was merged into Outworld. So yeah, that is a very, very good point. We could always have more realms added to sort of fix certain inconsistencies, or just to take the game further and solve one of those problems that we talked about, which was too few realms. Sorry, Phantom, we've interrupted you like 3 times now.
So, Fourth Snake, before we let you go, where can our listeners find you?
Well, there's... I'm not going to make the Twitter joke this time. It's been done enough. On Twitter, at Fourth Snake. No,
why is it not the Fourth? I'm joking.
There's YouTube, the Fourth Snake. All the video descriptions will also list stuff like the DeviantArt and the fanfiction.net and all those other places. And if you're looking for MK Chronicles specifically, the pinned tweet on my Twitter is all of those, and each one of those comes with the DeviantArt, fanfiction.net, and also archive of our own links, because I post these stories on all 3 of those sites because I'm insane.
We'll leave descriptions
in the description.
Yeah, exactly. In the show notes. Yep. Well, we'd like to thank all of our listeners for stopping by the Realm Kast today. Thank you very much, Fourth Snake, for joining us on this episode. It was a pleasure to have you on the Realm Kast. You can find Yanni and myself, Phantom, on the Mortal Kombat group on Facebook, as well as Yanni on the Mortal Kombat meme realm. Special thanks to Uppercut Editions for their continued support. The Realm Kast is the official podcast of Mortal Kombat Online. You can catch up on all episodes of the Realm Kast on YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, Spotify, and MortalKombatOnline.com.